She almost drove past him, and that would have been easier, but something in his tired eyes made her press the brakes, and in that quiet second, standing alone in the cold rain, he looked less like a stranger and more like a forgotten memory. The night was heavy, the sky dark and unforgiving, and the road stretched empty ahead of her like her own life, silent and uncertain. She had just left the office where she had been humiliated again, her voice ignored, her work stolen, her dignity crushed under the polished shoes of a man who believed he owned everything. Mr. Carter was powerful, respected, untouchable, and he made sure she remembered her place. She was quiet in meetings, careful with her words, and strong only inside, where no one could see the storm she carried every day. When he laughed at her idea and called it naive in front of everyone, the room had laughed too, and she had smiled politely, because she needed the job, because she had bills to pay, because fighting back meant losing everything. So she drove home that night with her hands tight on the steering wheel, her heart heavy, her eyes burning, and when she saw the old man standing by the roadside, soaked and trembling, she almost kept going. She did not need more trouble. She did not need another burden. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he stood straight despite the rain, maybe it was the quiet dignity in his posture, or maybe she simply could not ignore someone who looked as alone as she felt. She rolled down the window and asked softly if he needed help. He looked at her for a long second, as if measuring her soul, then nodded. He said his car had broken down miles away and his phone had died. His voice was calm, almost gentle. She unlocked the door without another question. The heater inside the car hummed softly as he settled in, water dripping from his coat onto the floor mat. She offered him a tissue. He thanked her with a small smile. They drove in silence at first. The rain tapped steadily against the glass, and the world outside blurred into streaks of light. After a few minutes, he asked her if she believed in kindness. The question surprised her. She hesitated, then said she used to. He asked what changed. She shrugged and kept her eyes on the road. She told him about work in simple words. She did not mention names. She said sometimes the loudest person wins, even if they are wrong. She said sometimes power speaks and truth stays quiet. He listened without interrupting. There was no pity in his expression, only attention. When she finished, she felt lighter, as if speaking had released something trapped inside her chest. He nodded slowly and said, "Patience is not weakness." She almost laughed at that. Patience had cost her promotions, respect, confidence. Patience had made her invisible. He seemed to sense her doubt. He said some storms pass quietly, but they still change the land. She did not fully understand, but his words stayed with her. When they reached the small motel near the highway, she pulled over. He searched his pockets and frowned. His wallet was missing. He looked embarrassed, almost ashamed. Without thinking, she paid for his room. It was not much, but it was money she could barely spare. He protested gently, but she insisted. Before stepping out, he turned to her and asked her name. She told him. He repeated it slowly, as if memorizing it. Then he said, "By morning, you will see that nothing is wasted." She smiled politely, thinking it was just an old man's attempt at comfort. She watched him walk toward the dim motel entrance, his figure small against the neon light, and then she drove away, believing she would never see him again. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling of her tiny apartment, replaying the day. In her mind, hearing Mr. Carter's voice, feeling the sting of humiliation, and wondering how long she could endure it. Yet beneath the sadness and the helplessness, there was a small spark, fragile but steady, the memory of a stranger's calm voice reminding her that patience is not weakness, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope, quietly, without expectation, as the rain continued to fall outside her window and the world waited for morning. Morning came too quickly, pale light slipping through her thin curtains, and for a few seconds she forgot everything, then reality returned like a weight on her chest. She moved slowly, made coffee she barely tasted, and prepared for another day under Mr. Carter's cold smile. The city looked different after the rain, clean but fragile, as if one harsh wind could undo it all. At the office, whispers were already spreading before she even reached her desk. Something big had happened overnight. The company's major investor had withdrawn support from a rival firm and redirected interest toward her department. No one knew why. Mr. Carter was pacing near the conference room, his jaw tight, his voice sharp as he barked orders. He hated surprises he did not control. She sat quietly at her desk, opening her email with trembling fingers. There was a message marked urgent from the board of directors. She assumed it was another correction, another criticism. Instead, it requested her presence in the executive meeting at noon. Her name was spelled correctly. Her title was written with respect. She stared at the screen, thinking it must be a mistake. She had never been invited to such meetings before. By noon, the entire floor felt tense. When she entered the large glass conference room, conversation stopped for a second. Mr. Carter looked at her with confusion, then annoyance. He clearly had not expected her. The board members greeted her politely. One of them, a serious woman with silver hair, asked her to present the proposal she had suggested last week, the same idea Mr. Carter had publicly dismissed. Her throat tightened. She glanced at him. His expression was forced, unreadable. She could feel the old fear rising, the memory of laughter, the instinct to shrink. But then she remembered the old man's steady eyes in the rain. Patience is not weakness. She took a slow breath and began to speak. Her voice was soft at first, but clear. She explained the strategy step by step, showing data she had carefully prepared on her own time, anticipating objections she had heard in the past. The room grew quiet, not with mockery this time, but with attention. One board member leaned forward. Another nodded slowly. When she finished, there was a pause, heavy and powerful. Then the silver-haired woman thanked her and said the proposal aligned perfectly with the interests of a new major partner who had expressed strong confidence in her approach. Mr. Carter shifted in his chair. He tried to take credit, mentioning that he had guided her work. The silver-haired woman interrupted him gently but firmly. She said the new partner had specifically requested that the project remain under her direct leadership. The words hung in the air. Under her leadership. She felt her heartbeat in her ears. Mr. Carter's face tightened, but he forced a smile. After the meeting, people looked at her differently. Not warmly yet, but cautiously, as if reevaluating something they had underestimated. She returned to her desk, her hands slightly shaking, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. Success in that building often created enemies. In the afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the office entrance. Through the glass walls, she noticed the subtle shift in posture among the executives. The driver opened the back door, and stepping out, with calm and familiar dignity, was the old man from the rain. He was no longer wearing a worn coat. He wore a tailored suit, perfectly fitted, his hair neatly combed, his presence commanding without effort. The security staff greeted him with visible respect. Mr. Carter hurried downstairs, almost running. She watched from above, her breath caught in her throat. The old man looked up toward the windows, as if he knew exactly where she stood. Their eyes met for a brief second. He did not smile widely. He simply nodded, the same calm nod he had given her in the car. The realization moved through her slowly. He was not just a stranded traveler. He was the new major partner, the investor who now held influence over the company's future. Her knees felt weak, but she stayed standing. Sadness and helplessness had defined her for so long that hope still felt unreal. Yet there it was, standing at the entrance in a tailored suit, walking past the man who once controlled her fate, changing the balance of power without raising his voice. And for the first time, she understood what he meant. Nothing is wasted. Not patience. Not kindness. Not even a rainy night on an empty road. The building felt smaller that afternoon, as if the walls themselves were listening. She tried to focus on her screen, but every few minutes her mind replayed the image of him stepping out of that car, calm, composed, powerful without showing it. Mr. Carter had locked himself in his office with the board for nearly 2 hours. The tension spread across the floor like electricity. No one spoke too loudly. No one laughed. She kept her head down, answering emails, reviewing numbers, doing what she always did, steady and patient. Inside, however, something had shifted. The helplessness was still there, but it no longer owned her. It felt like a chapter closing quietly. Near the end of the day, her assistant approached her desk and said the new partner wanted to see her privately. Her heart skipped. She walked to the executive lounge slowly, each step measured, refusing to let excitement show. When she entered, he was standing near the window, looking at the city below. In daylight, he seemed even more composed. He turned as she stepped in. His eyes were the same as in the rain, observant, thoughtful. He thanked her again for that night. She told him it was nothing, just a ride. He shook his head gently and said kindness is never just a ride. Then he explained the truth. He had stepped away from public business months ago to quietly evaluate the companies he might invest in. He wanted to see how people behaved when they believed no one important was watching. He had heard of her firm's potential, but he did not trust reports alone. That night, his driver had indeed dropped him off nearby because he wanted to walk, to think, to feel the ground under his feet without titles attached to his name. When the rain started and his phone battery died, he could have called for help sooner, but he chose to wait. He wanted to see who would stop. Many cars passed. She was the only one who slowed down. He said he recognized something in her silence during the ride. Strength without bitterness. Pain without cruelty. He had asked around quietly the next morning before revealing himself. He had learned about her work, her dismissed proposals, the credit taken from her. He had also learned about Mr. Carter's pattern of intimidation. She listened without interrupting, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. He told her that influence is a responsibility, not a weapon. And he did not invest in companies led by fear. He had already spoken with the board. Structural changes were being prepared. Transparent leadership. Independent review of past projects. Accountability. The word echoed softly in her mind. Accountability. It sounded unreal, like something from a different world. She asked him why he cared so much. He smiled slightly and said once, long ago, someone had stopped for him when he was young and powerless, and that moment changed the direction of his life. He never forgot it. He said power should protect the quiet ones, not silence them. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she kept her posture straight. She had spent so long holding herself together that even hope felt heavy. He then did something unexpected. He offered her the position of project director for the new partnership, with full authority over the strategy she had designed. Not as a favor, as recognition. He said the company's future would depend on people like her. She felt the room spin slightly. For years she had been told to wait her turn, to stay in line, to accept less. Now patience had brought her to a doorway she never imagined. She did not answer immediately. She asked for time, just a day, to think. He respected that. As she left the lounge, she passed Mr. Carter in the hallway. He looked different. Still well dressed, still polished, but the certainty in his eyes had cracked. He forced a thin smile and congratulated her on the presentation, his tone controlled but tight. She nodded politely, the same way she always had. Only this time, she did not feel small. She felt steady. The sadness of the past had not disappeared, but it no longer defined her. She walked out of the building that evening under a clear sky. The rain was gone. The air felt lighter. She stood for a moment near the curb, remembering the night before, remembering how close she had come to driving past that lonely figure in the storm. Justice had not arrived loudly. It had come quietly, step by step, through patience and a simple act of kindness. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that the morning had truly changed everything. That night she did not rush her decision. She sat by her small kitchen window and watched the city lights flicker, thinking about every moment that had brought her here, the laughter in the conference room, the sleepless nights, the rain on the windshield, and the quiet voice that told her patience is not weakness. She realized she had already made her choice long ago, not when the offer came, but when she refused to become bitter, when she kept working even after being humiliated, when she stopped for a stranger because her heart would not let her drive away. The next morning she walked into the office with calm steps and clear eyes. The board meeting was brief. She accepted the position, not with excitement, but with quiet strength. Mr. Carter was present, his posture rigid, his confidence carefully stitched together. The silver-haired board member announced an internal investigation into past leadership practices, citing concerns about ethics and transparency. The room was silent. Mr. Carter tried to defend himself, his voice polished, his arguments precise, but for the first time no one rushed to support him. Influence had shifted. Protection had vanished. Over the following weeks the truth surfaced slowly. Emails, witness statements, patterns of intimidation, credit taken, careers stalled. The untouchable man became accountable piece by piece. He was not dragged out dramatically. There was no shouting, Just a formal statement, a resignation accepted, a quiet exit through the same glass doors he once dominated. She watched from her office window as he left carrying a single briefcase, and she felt no triumph, only closure. Justice did not feel like revenge. It felt like balance restored. In her new role she kept her door open, literally and figuratively. She listened more than she spoke. She made sure ideas were credited properly. She created space for voices that had once been ignored, because she knew exactly how silence feels. The old man visited occasionally, never announcing himself loudly. Sometimes they shared tea in the lounge, speaking about strategy, about responsibility, about how power should be used carefully. He never treated her like a charity case. He treated her like a leader. Months later, as the company began to grow under transparent leadership, she drove home one evening under a light drizzle. The road looked almost the same as that first night. For a moment she slowed near the spot where she had picked him up. The memory made her smile softly. She understood now that change rarely arrives with fireworks. It arrives in small choices. In quiet endurance. In stopping when it would be easier to pass by. She had once felt invisible, powerless, trapped under someone else's authority. Now she stood steady, not because someone saved her, but because she never abandoned herself. The injustice she suffered had shaped her, but it did not define her ending. By morning everything had changed, yes, but not by magic. It changed because kindness met opportunity, because patience met truth, because a quiet woman refused to let humiliation turn her into something small. And as she drove forward into the soft rain, she realized the most powerful transformation was not the fall of an arrogant man, but the rise of her own voice, calm, steady, and finally heard.